Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. A few minutes have passed since I last posted the video about a beat 'em up on this channel, and as you know I am one for giving people what they want, so I thought it was about time that I uploaded another one. As for this legendary genre, first established by the wonderful Yoshihisa Kishimoto, in the past on here we've explored the forever popular River City / Kunio-kun series. Starting life in Japan way back in 1986, the game known as Nekketsu Kōha Kunio-kun, or Hot-Blooded Tough Guy Kunio, if you want to be all gauging about it, would establish several of the tropes that we now associate with beat-em-ups. After gaining a foothold in the West and being reskinned as Renegade, the game would receive a large number of sequels and spin-offs that are still being worked on to this very day. Speaking of this iconic franchise, games such as Renegade itself, River City Girls and more have all received the top hat treatment in the past, including of course the hugely influential River City Ransom. While Kunio-kun is mostly associated with beat 'em ups, the series did not even strictly stick to the genre of reckless endangerment and grievous bodily harm either, as Technos Japan, the publishers behind the series, decided that they would go into eventual bankruptcy with a bang, going as far as to tackle the often neglected world of dodgeball and other random sports. Despite all of these ludicrous yet fun games existing, today we shall be taking a deep dive into a different genre from the Kunio franchise, this one being the first to make it into the wonderful world of 16-bit gaming, and the first Kunio beat 'em up from Technos Japan after the success of River City Ransom. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Shodai Nekketsu Kōha Kunio-kun, or River City Ransom 2, as many in the West refer to it as of now. Yeah! Shodai Nekketsu Kōha Kunio-kun, which translates as the original hot-blooded tough guy Kunio, is a direct sequel to the classic 1986 high school bully smasher Nekketsu Kōha Kunio-kun. Now you might be wondering, if this is the case, then what happened to River City Ransom that saw release in between these two games? Well, River City Ransom, known as Downtown Nekketsu Monogatari in Japan, featured a super deformed comedic art style, whereas the new game for the Super Famicom features a look similar to the arcade original, so carries on where that game's story left off. However, that doesn't mean it doesn't borrow a ton of mechanics that are established in the Downtown console game. As expected, this Super Famicom title's star of the show is the titular original hot-blooded tough guy himself, Kunio, a high school student with a penchant for protecting his classmates from the local bully population. If we think of Bimmy and Jimmy as Technos Japan's main white meat the babyface mascots, then Kunio on the other hand is more of a stone cold Steve Austin. This rebellious delinquent is always up for a fight. So with this proclivity towards administering physical punishments to louts, criminals and gang members that was explored in Kunio's first groundbreaking arcade outing, now 16-bit consoles had made it home, wigs could be split on the much more advanced and graphically capable Super Nintendo, meaning that those beloved sprites would look all that more glorious on this more modern visit. Development of this newer title would be handled by a seemingly entirely new group of Technos staff, rather than using the team involved in the creation of the other games. An exceedingly bold move considering how precious Kunio and his games have become to Technos as a whole, but nothing new for the company when you look at all of the risks they would constantly take with their lucrative Double Dragon series. Norihiro Sawada and Noboru Tsuda, who spearheaded the new team, went on to work on the Shenmue and Ni no Kuni series respectively, suggesting that at least the Technos cash cow was in a talented set of hands indeed. These gentlemen and the team decided that they did not want to tread the tired beat-em-up tracks that the original had made 6 years earlier, so in an effort to freshen things up and to give their franchise player the 16-bit welcome he deserved, they decided to implement several new gameplay mechanics and a brand new real-world setting. The game would also mix the more serious graphical style of the original Kunio-kun with the RPG-like features of the River City NES game, featuring an intriguing story packed in as well. As for this tale, on the suggestion of the recently transferred student, Yoshihiro, Kunio and his defenseless high school classmates are headed to the bustling cosmopolitan city of Osaka on a field trip. However, rather than behaving like a tourist, a tired Kunio refuses the offer of sightseeing from his friends. Instead, he stumbles through Osaka jaded from the day's travel, looking for the imaginatively titled Hotel Osaka, so he can simply go to bed. On his search for sleep, Kunio comes across Ricky, his rival and the first stage boss from the arcade game, and friend and second player character from downtown Nekketsu. In this game, Ricky is also conveniently on the field trip and staying in the same place as Kunio too. Logically, they decide to buddy up and find the elusive hotel together, which Kunio of course almost instantly regrets due to Ricky's bizarre tendency to gorge on what appears to be pork pies, the greedy bugger. On the way though, Kunio is set upon by a dirty ruffian, who apparently belongs to one of several local high school street gangs. Kunio, hardened by his years of policing the playgrounds of Tokyo against scum of this sort, dispatches the deplorable with ease, allowing him and Ricky to eventually reach the relative safety and comfort of Hotel Osaka. Personally, I don't remember anything quite this exciting happening on any of my school trips before, although it's hard to be attacked by street gangs when you visit the local zoo. Now in the building, the exhausted hero makes his way to his room in order to have a well-deserved rest, and to recover some of that precious HP no doubt. However, his slumber is soon disturbed by one of his ever-in-peril classmates, who informs him of even more gang-based shenanigans now taking place in the car park. Not only that, one of their peers has managed to get themselves involved. Kunio, knowing that he now has to dispense justice on behalf of his stricken comrade, he must leap into action. Once again, Kunio defeats the insurgents single-handedly. Well, I say single-handedly. If you have the luxury of a real-life friend that you can stand for longer than 20 minutes, then co-op is also a possibility. Remember that Ricky chap that Kunio met on his way to the hotel? Well, he is once again a usable character for player 2. But come on, who wants to be some pork pie obsessed dweeb when the original hot-blooded tough guy Kunio and his iron will is up for grabs? Not this gaming man, that's for sure, no matter how much I support the main export of Melton Mulberry. After handling the assailants, Kunio goes on to travel through several areas of Osaka, defeating a seemingly never-ending collection of gang members intent on ruining his day. During this exploration of the city, the new mechanics that Technos added to the game begin to shine and make this truly feel like a next-generation experience. When the player enters combat, either initiated through physical provocation or a random encounter, the scrolling screen locks in place. This is a truly interesting piece of presentation, one that pays tribute to the more static scenes that are commonplace in its predecessor, and mimicking the classic JRPG trope of having a separate battle screen. Unlike traditional JRPGs though, here the battle screen is the section of the overworld that you were traversing when the battle began. The transition between the free-scrolling overworld and static battle scenes is rather smooth and impressive for a 1992 release. Once all the enemies in the static encounter are defeated, the scrolling is unlocked and Kunio is free to explore once again. As a reward for rendering enemies unconscious, Kunio receives a mixture of experience points, prepaid cards which act as currency or useful items. The experience points are collected in order for Kunio to improve various stats, such as health and luck, which certainly aids the speed of progression. He also gains access to a host of new fighting techniques, such as a jump kick, low blow, and a suplex, which again makes tackling the enemies that much easier. Alongside these new fighting techniques, you also obtain the ability to perform spiritual magic that costs key points to perform. These often take the form of temporary buffs towards power or defense, but there are also restorative spells that can be utilised. The experience points necessary to unlock these new abilities can also be obtained by randomly attacking non-violent NPCs that wander the overworld. However, mugging these innocent citizens never yields any money or items, and only gives the player a small amount of experience. Remember viewers, crime doesn't pay. Well, unless you are Kunio, or Stone Cold Steve Austin, I guess. Despite the presence of these prepaid cards that we mentioned earlier, there are no shops to be found in the game. These cash cards are actually only usable on a small number of vending machines that are dotted around the city. They provide small heals and temporary buffs for Kunio, saving those precious key points. Instead of being purchasable, weapons and items such as Kaiser Knuckles and wooden clogs are often found in the overworld. Kunio also comes across pieces of cloth, and these act as the armour of the game for some reason. They can also be gifted to the player by a friendly NPC, or dropped as loot from your stricken foes. These items add a much needed layer of depth to the gameplay, and really allows this title to set itself apart from its predecessors. On the subject of friendly and charitable NPCs, Shodai Nekketsu Kōha Kunio-kun also ushered in the ability to converse with these people. In earlier entries in the series, defeated enemies would sometimes blurt out a brief phrase that was displayed in a text box at the bottom of the screen, such as the infamous and hilarious "Bath," the most famous line in River City Ransom. Now the player can initiate conversation with the NPCs at the touch of a button. These kind NPCs also help Kunio back to his room if the hero is ever down during combat. Whilst back at the hotel room, Kunio can decide to take a nap in order to restore HP and key points. Once Kunio rises from his slumber, the game world will have switched to either night or day, depending on when he went to bed. There are unique events that only happen at certain times of day, meaning that you will be spending a lot of time in this hotel room. But it is a pretty cool feature in my opinion to include a day-night cycle in a game that saw release this long ago. Interestingly, there is a known bug that switches when some events will appear, which is reported to cause frustration at times. Whilst out at night, Kunio will be ambushed by far more gang members and drunkards than before, conjuring the well-used image of dangerous drunk-filled streets. Whilst this hardly seems like a set of well-shifted improvements, it does offer evidence that Technos really were trying to make this vehicle for their mascot the best possible game that they could. The continued blending of beat 'em up and RPG was a very brave choice for them to go with, but they should be applauded for doing so. So anyway, Kunio smashes his way around several locales in Osaka, wielding various weaponry, levelling up and generally causing havoc. His ultimate goal is the destruction of the Osaka Union, the main villainous gang that has been attacking Kunio and his classmates since their arrival. In order to complete this objective, Kunio joins forces with another street gang, the Osaka Alliance, which to me is the equivalent of opting to join the Judean People's Front over the People's Front of Judea. What an odd choice. Anyway, as the fight between the two factions rages on, it is revealed that Yoshihiro, the transfer student who suggested the field trip originally, is in fact a double agent, working for the Osaka Union the entire time. He then kills the head of the Union, who has only been in the job for 5 minutes after they assassinated the original boss earlier, and takes up leadership of the gang. Yoshihiro then states that this whole thing has been part of his plan to take over the entirety of Japan, using his collection of criminals and, high schoolers. He even goes on to claim that he transferred to Kunio's school in order to keep watch on him, and eventually to kill him should Kunio interfere with his grand plan. After establishing that Yoshihiro is apparently an absolute nutcase, Kunio of course has the dispatch of this undesirable individual. Upon achieving victory, Kunio departs with some cutting words about how power should be used by those who possess it, cementing his place as the true hero of Japan. As you would have been able to see from all of this, it becomes clear that Shodai Nekketsu Kōha Kunio-kun, a game that is often referred to as River City Ransom 2, is an intriguing game, which makes it all the more a huge shame that this game never made it to the West. Gamers on the whole adored River City Ransom, or Street Gangs I guess as it's known here in Europe, so would likely have been fond of this title too. Maybe Technos of Japan just felt that this game leaned too much into RPG mechanics and story dialogue for this game to be commercially viable beyond Japanese shores. Or maybe Downtown Nekketsu Monogatari never sold well enough abroad to warrant a 16-bit successor elsewhere. Never receiving this game in the 90s is a loss nonetheless. Due to this lack of exposure on Western shores, the game seems to be rarely talked about within the Anglosphere, which is compounded further by the fact that it seems few, if any, Western journalists even looked at this game on release back in 1992. While we can now enjoy this game via the glory of emulation and fan translations, I still would not put an official release and translation completely out of the window. After all, the franchise's newest installment, River City Girls, was a huge hit, which led to the other Kunio-kun Super Famicom game being translated to see release on modern hardware. With River City Girls confirmed to be on the way and drawing all sorts of excitement, maybe we will finally get this game soon too. For now though, I strongly urge viewers to give this often overlooked game a play for yourself. It is an important entry within the Kunio-kun franchise after all, so grab yourself an English fan translation and enjoy this pork pie obsessed opening cutscene. The game is worth a playthrough for that alone. Yeah! So ladies and gentlemen, that was the story of River City Ransom 2. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure you check out my previous videos that I have made covering the history of the Kunio-kun series, including even an upload on River City Girls 0, the Super Famicom game that came out after the one we have covered today. I've already got a video on that within my content library for you to explore. These videos are partially funded by the amazing people who back this channel on Patreon, who recently I've been asked in whether they want to feature a question at the end of each of one of these videos. And when I put this forward to patron House of the Ted, his response was, a surprise to be sure, but a welcome one. Top Hat, what is your favourite game which functions as a prequel? Which I think was a very, very good question. So thank you for watching my career with great interest. Yippee. So when it comes to this, I'm going to say probably Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII for the PlayStation Portable. An absolutely amazing game, which obviously is a prequel to the amazing Final Fantasy VII. This game does not seem to get talked about quite so much today, probably because it's one of those rare games that has not been ported to everything under the sun. I would love to play a consoleized version of that fantastic game so I can play it on the big screen rather than just on a tiny little PSP monitor for a change. And the only reason I can fathom as to why it has been left on a handheld is maybe Square Enix did not want to take the shine off of their so-called Final Fantasy VII remake, which isn't a remake. It's a complete reboot, but that's a whole topic for another time. But yes, anyway, cheerio.